Olivia Mercer arrived at Allison and Marcus Hale's apartment just after 6, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies, Robert's favorite. It had been 2 years since her husband's passing, and this dinner was supposed to be a quiet moment of remembrance, a simple family evening to honor him. But the second the door opened, Olivia felt a chill run across her skin. Allison stood there with a strained smile that never reached her eyes. The dark circles beneath them looked like bruised petals, subtle, but unmistakable to a mother. Her hands trembled as she reached for the flowers, nearly dropping them before catching herself. Olivia gently steadied her daughter's fingers, but Allison flinched at even that soft touch. "Mom, come in," she whispered, forcing warmth into her voice. But the fear underneath it was impossible to hide. Inside, everything was staged to look perfect. The table was set with polished silverware, candles glowing, soft jazz floating in the background. Marcus Hale appeared from the kitchen, carrying a platter of roasted salmon. To anyone else, he might have looked like the model husband, smiling, gracious, charming. But Olivia saw the truth. The way his eyes flicked toward Allison, first checking her posture, the calculated smoothness of his movements, the tension humming beneath every polite gesture. "Olivia, you made it," he said warmly. "We're honored to have you. Tonight is important." His tone was soft, but the way Allison stiffened told Olivia exactly what kind of importance Marcus meant. Gloria Hale, Marcus's mother, sat already at the dining table. Tall, sharp-featured, and impeccably dressed, she barely acknowledged Olivia's presence. Her eyes were cold, dissecting, as though she were sitting in judgment of the entire room. When Allison tried to pour her a glass of sparkling water, Gloria didn't say thank you. She simply watched her daughter-in-law with disdainful amusement. Dinner started quietly, the clinking of silverware far louder than the polite conversation. Olivia tried her best to talk about Robert, his calm nature, his sense of humor, but each time Allison attempted to join in, Marcus would rest his hand on her wrist, a subtle squeeze, a silent command, and Allison would immediately fall silent. By the time the main course was served, Olivia's heartbeat had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Something was wrong. Something beyond grief, beyond tension. She could feel it pressing against the walls of the room. Then it happened. Allison reached for the pitcher to refill Marcus's glass. Her hand shook, just slightly, and a single drop of water slid down the side of the cup, landing near Marcus's plate. He froze, completely. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "What," he said softly, dangerously, "did you just do?" Allison's face drained of color. "I didn't mean," before she could finish, Marcus's hand shot out. He grabbed her by the forearm, yanking her out of her chair so violently the table rattled. Plates clattered, glasses tipped. Olivia gasped as Allison swayed, nearly losing her balance. "You can't do anything right," Marcus hissed, his face inches from hers. "One simple task. One." Gloria didn't flinch. In fact, she smirked. Olivia rose from her seat, so quickly her chair scraped across the hardwood. "Let her go," she demanded, her voice shaking. "Marcus, let her go now." Marcus tightened his grip. Allison winced, tears slipping down her cheeks in silent streams. That was enough. Olivia pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed 911 with hands that trembled from fury rather than fear. Her voice was steady as she reported an active domestic assault. Within minutes, sirens pierced the quiet evening. Officers entered the apartment and separated everyone. Marcus tried to protest, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But the red marks on Allison's arm told a different story. The police handcuffed him. Allison curled into herself, shaking, as Olivia wrapped her arms around her daughter. As Marcus was escorted out, Gloria stood behind the officers. Her lips lifted into a slow, poisonous smile, a silent promise. This wasn't over. Long after the police car's taillights disappeared into the Seattle night, Olivia sat beside her daughter on the living room couch, holding Allison's cold hand between her own. The apartment had fallen silent, but Olivia's mind had not. Instead, it drifted backward, years before Marcus ever appeared, into the life she once believed was unshakable. For most of her adult years, Olivia's world revolved around her small, steady family, her husband Robert and their only child, Allison. Their home had always been a place of gentle noise, laughter around the dinner table, the soft shuffle of Robert's newspaper in the morning, the rhythmic tapping of Allison's ballet shoes on the hardwood as she practiced routines she insisted were almost perfect. Robert had always been the calm center of their lives. He was patient, thoughtful, endlessly supportive of their daughter's bold, energetic spark. When Allison announced she wanted to try theater, Robert built her a small practice stage in the garage. When she switched to soccer the next year, he became the loudest parent on the sidelines, cheering until his voice cracked. Olivia was the disciplinarian, the organizer, the glue, but Robert was the heart. It wasn't until he died suddenly, a cardiac event no one saw coming, that Olivia realized just how much of their emotional foundation had rested on him. The day Allison received the news, her bright spirit dimmed in a single afternoon. She became quieter, canceling performances, skipping classes, withdrawing from friends. Olivia did everything she could, cooking Allison's favorite meals, sitting with her at night, talking through the grief. But the house felt colder, emptier. Their rhythm broke, and that was when Marcus entered. He appeared during one of the hardest chapters of their grief, the same year Robert passed. At first, he seemed like a blessing, a stable, successful man who paid attention to Allison when she felt invisible. Olivia remembered the first time she met him. He shook her hand firmly, complimented the garden Robert used to tend, and spoke in a voice so calm and warm that Olivia almost cried. She thought, maybe someone finally sees my daughter again. Looking back now, she saw the truth. She saw how precise his timing had been, how he had stepped in exactly when Allison was most fragile, most desperate to feel protected. She saw how his kindness had been tailored, how his compliments had struck exactly the places where Allison felt hollow. But she didn't see any of that then. Back then, Olivia told herself Allison was healing. She told herself this man's attention was helping her daughter stitch her life back together. And when Allison started smiling again, small smiles at first, then more confident ones, Olivia believed Marcus was part of the light, not the shadow behind it. Now, sitting in the aftermath of the violent dinner, Olivia replayed every memory with an ache that tasted like guilt. She remembered moments she dismissed, the way Marcus guided Allison's choices with gentle suggestions, the way Allison apologized too quickly, the way she always checked Marcus's expression before speaking in group conversations. Olivia had chalked it up to shyness, to new relationship nerves, to the lingering grief over Robert. But they weren't nerves. They were symptoms. She should have recognized them. She had lived long enough to spot harmful patterns, to see the difference between love and control. But grief had blinded both of them, and Marcus had walked straight through the open door that grief created. As Allison rested her head on her mother's shoulder, Olivia felt the full weight of her failure settle inside her chest. She had missed the signs. She had trusted a man who had studied her daughter's vulnerabilities like a blueprint. And now she understood something with painful clarity. Marcus hadn't just entered their lives at the right moment. He had been waiting for it 3 years earlier, long before the dinner that shattered every illusion. Olivia Mercer had walked into a downtown Seattle corporate networking event with nothing more on her mind than surviving the evening. She was there as a junior project coordinator, filling in for a sick colleague. She expected small talk, polite nods, and the usual swirl of professional chatter. What she didn't expect was Marcus Hale. He approached her near the refreshment table, offering a glass of sparkling water with a warm, practiced smile. He wore a tailored navy suit that fit like it had been crafted for him alone. His posture was straight, his movements controlled, his voice deep but not intimidating. Everything about him radiated stability and confidence. "You look like you're trying to escape," he said lightly. Allison laughed, an unguarded, surprised sound. It had been months since she'd laughed without feeling self-conscious. She told him she was just filling in. He told her he admired people who stepped up when others couldn't. Compliments flowed easily from him, never feeling forced, always tailored to make her feel seen. He asked questions and actually listened to her answers. He remembered details. He repeated them back in a way that made her feel important. The chemistry was instant, effortless, flattering, overwhelming. When Olivia arrived to pick Allison up later that evening, she found her daughter talking animatedly with Marcus in the lobby. Robert, still alive then, had come along for the ride and joined them with his usual warm curiosity. Marcus shifted smoothly from charming date to respectful gentleman, shaking Robert's hand firmly. "Your daughter is impressive," he told Robert. "Sharp mind, genuine kindness. Hard combination to find." Robert glowed with pride. A man who could see Allison's strengths so clearly was, to him, a rare and welcome presence. During the drive home, he told Olivia he liked Marcus. Solid young man, respectful, grounded. Olivia agreed, but quietly, in a place she barely acknowledged even to herself. Something felt too polished, too rehearsed. She told herself she was being overprotective. After all, what evidence did she have? Marcus hadn't done anything wrong. If anything, he had gone out of his way to make Allison feel comfortable. So she stayed silent. Within weeks, Marcus integrated himself seamlessly into their lives. He remembered birthdays. He brought flowers for Olivia, always calling her Mrs. Mercer with a respectful nod. He helped Robert carry heavy gardening supplies and never complained. He sent Allison encouraging texts before her meetings. "You've got this. You're brilliant. I believe in you." Allison fell fast, and deeply. "He's ideal," she told Olivia one night, her eyes bright with excitement. "He feels like someone Dad would trust. Someone who truly cares about me." Olivia nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and caution. She wanted her daughter to be happy. She wanted Allison to heal from the emotional bruises that grief had left behind. And Marcus seemed to be exactly the kind of person who could offer comfort. At least, that was how it looked then. Marcus began showing up for family dinners. He brought Allison small, thoughtful gifts, a book she mentioned once in passing, her favorite pastries from a bakery across town, a photo frame for your favorite memories. He paid attention in a way that made Allison glow. Even the neighbors commented on how happy and lively she seemed. And Marcus used that warmth with precision. He learned Robert's habits. He mirrored Olivia's values. He adapted himself to fit seamlessly into the Mercer household. Like a piece of a puzzle no one had realized was missing. Looking back, Olivia would remember the first time she saw the faint flicker in his eyes, a momentary sharpness when Allison laughed a bit too loudly. It lasted less than a second. She brushed it off. Everyone else saw a charming, respectful, reliable man. Only much later would Olivia realize that charm had been calculated, that attentiveness had been strategic, that Marcus had studied their family the way a surgeon studies anatomy, mapping each vulnerability with quiet precision. And that was how he entered. Perfectly, smoothly, at exactly the right moment. The honeymoon to Cyprus was supposed to be the beginning of everything beautiful. For the first 2 days, it looked exactly like that. Sun-soaked beaches, turquoise water stretching endlessly toward the horizon, small cafes perched along stone streets, and Allison glowing with the kind of happiness Olivia hadn't seen since before Robert passed. The photos they sent home were perfect. Marcus and Allison smiling against ancient ruins. Allison holding a cup of strong Cypriot coffee, her hair pulled back by the warm Mediterranean breeze. Marcus's arm draped around her shoulders, protective and proud. Their messages were full of laughter and inside jokes. The kind newlyweds send when the world feels soft and hopeful. Everything looked idyllic. But on the third day, the fracture appeared. It happened in the most mundane way, so ordinary that Allison would later struggle to believe it had triggered something so dark. They were having lunch at a seaside tavern, sitting beneath a white umbrella while the waves lapped gently against the shore. A young waiter approached with menus, smiling politely as he asked where they were visiting from. Allison answered enthusiastically, mentioning how beautiful the island was and how she wanted to explore the old port later that evening. It was nothing, a simple exchange, light, friendly, harmless. But Marcus's expression shifted almost instantly. His smile stiffened, his jaw tightened, his hand, resting on the tablecloth, curled into a fist. The moment the waiter left, Marcus's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Do you always flirt with strangers like that?" Allison froze. "Marcus, I wasn't. I was just talking to him." "That's what you call talking?" His eyes narrowed. You were practically begging for his attention. Her heart kicked painfully against her ribs. She tried to explain, calmly, rationally, what had really happened. But Marcus leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with exaggerated disappointment. "I didn't realize I married someone who needs validation from every man who walks by." The words hit like a slap. Allison felt her throat tighten. "Marcus, that's not fair." But the moment she spoke, he stood abruptly, pushing his chair back so hard it scraped against the stone floor. Without another word, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting alone under the bright island sun, trembling with confusion. For an hour, he ignored her calls. When she finally found him back at the hotel, he didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he accused her softly, almost sorrowfully, twisting the narrative so effectively that she began questioning every detail of the interaction. "You embarrassed me," he said. "I need a wife who respects our marriage." By the time the conversation ended, Allison was apologizing, though she wasn't even sure what for. She cried. He stayed silent, and when she reached for him, he stepped back just an inch, withholding the smallest sign of affection. It was the first psychological crack, the first moment where reality bent under the weight of his interpretation. That night, Marcus didn't touch her, didn't speak unless necessary, didn't offer a single gesture of closeness. The silence felt like punishment. But the next morning, he woke her with breakfast in bed, fresh fruit, pastries, and a single red rose placed carefully on the tray. His smile was warm again, his voice soft. He kissed her forehead and told her he loved her, that they had simply misunderstood each other, that the trip was too special to be ruined by a small disagreement. He bought her a delicate bracelet from a jewelry shop near the marina. He held her hand as they walked along the shore. He stroked her hair while she rested on his shoulder during the sunset cruise. The honeymoon phase had returned, but something in Allison had shifted. A thread of uncertainty, thin but persistent, had wound itself through her chest. She didn't know it then, but this moment, this single, ordinary conversation, twisted into betrayal, would become the first link in a long chain of control. The beginning of a pattern that would shape their entire marriage. The first fracture had appeared, and Marcus made sure it would never fully heal. After the Cyprus honeymoon, the shift in Marcus was so gradual, so carefully disguised, that Allison didn't notice the walls closing in until they were already around her. He didn't forbid anything outright, not at first. He framed his concerns as protection, love, or simple practicality. But underneath the softness, something colder was taking shape. The first wedge he drove was between Allison and her friends. He began with gentle comments. "I'm not sure Leah respects you," or "Jessica seems to take advantage of your kindness." When Allison insisted her friends meant well, Marcus would sigh, almost sadly, as though he saw something she didn't. And soon, she found herself canceling plans, choosing nights in with Marcus instead. Then he expanded the pattern. He questioned her co-workers, subtly at first. "That co-worker of yours, Ben, he seems a little too friendly." Or, "Do you really think they value you there? I just don't want you to get hurt." Allison, wanting to avoid conflict, began withdrawing at work, skipping lunches, limiting conversations, keeping her head down. Marcus praised her when she told him, "See, you're learning to be careful." After Robert's death, Marcus's influence deepened. Olivia was grieving, and Allison tried to divide her time between supporting her mother and navigating her own loss. But Marcus saw the opening and stepped directly into it. "Your mom is strong," he would say, "but she leans on you too much. It's not healthy for you. You need someone stable to lean on too. Someone stable. Someone like him." Soon, Marcus became her primary emotional reference point. Her confidant, her comfort, her compass. And once she depended on him fully, the control tightened. It began with clothing. He complimented certain outfits, then made offhand comments about others. "That skirt's a bit much for work. I like your hair better down. Not in a ponytail. That top draws the wrong kind of attention." Allison started dressing within the invisible boundaries he created. Soft colors, modest cuts. Nothing that might draw a second glance. Next came her schedule. Marcus tracked her day with increasing scrutiny. "Text me when you arrive. Let me know if your meeting ends late. Why didn't you answer right away?" If she was slow to respond, he'd accuse her of disrespect. If she forgot, he'd withdraw affection for hours. Her world shrank. Quietly, predictably, he monitored her communication, scrolling through her messages to make sure no one is manipulating you. He insisted on knowing her passwords for safety. If she hesitated, he reminded her of how much he did for her, how he only wanted to protect her. And then came the first physical act. It wasn't dramatic, not like later. It was a quick shove during an argument about dinner plans. Allison stumbled into the counter, breath catching in her throat. Marcus immediately apologized, lavishly. He blamed stress, work pressure, even himself. "I hate myself for losing control," he murmured, pulling her close. "Help me get better. Don't give up on me." She comforted him. She believed him. But the second time came weeks later. A grab to her wrist when she tried to walk away. A squeeze that left faint marks. Another apology. Another promise. Another cycle. And then there was Gloria. When Marcus's mother noticed a small bruise on Allison's arm during a Sunday dinner, she didn't express concern. She simply ushered Allison into the bathroom, closed the door, and pulled a compact from her purse. "You need to learn how to hide these properly," Gloria said with clinical detachment. "It's not good for a wife to cause unnecessary drama." She blended concealer over the bruise with practiced hands, as though she'd done it many times before, for herself or for someone else. In that moment, Allison understood something quietly devastating. Marcus's behavior wasn't a flaw. It was a family pattern. And Gloria wasn't horrified by it. She was helping him maintain it. Little by little, control became structure. Structure became routine. Routine became a cage. And by the time Allison realized she was trapped, Marcus had already built the prison around her with precision and patience. The first real act of violence came on a cold Thursday evening, months after the honeymoon fracture, but long before anyone outside their home suspected a thing. Allison had forgotten to heat Marcus's dinner on time, an oversight so small she didn't think twice about it. But when he opened the microwave and found lukewarm food, something in him snapped. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her hard against the kitchen wall. The impact echoed through the apartment. Allison gasped, her back searing with pain as framed photos rattled from the force. For a moment, she could only stare at him, stunned, breath caught between disbelief and terror. The change in Marcus was instantaneous. His eyes softened. His hands trembled. He stepped back as though horrified by what he'd done. "Allison, God, I'm sorry," he whispered. "It's the stress. Work is killing me. I didn't mean it. You know I'd never hurt you." She nodded because it was easier than arguing, because the apology was warm, practiced, tender, because she wanted so badly to believe it, and because the cycle had already begun. For a while the house stayed quiet. Marcus tried harder, brought home flowers, cooked dinner, spoke softly, slept curled against her like he couldn't bear to be apart. Allison told herself it was a one-time mistake, but it wasn't. The next time he shoved her aside when she reached for his phone, thinking it was hers buzzing. The time after that, he slammed a cupboard door so close to her face that she felt the air shift across her cheek. Then came the nights when he grabbed her wrist to stop her from walking away, squeezing until she had to bite back a cry. Over time, the violence became routine, not always visible but always present. Implosions followed by apologies, threats buried beneath whispers of love, control disguised as concern. Every moment of peace felt like a countdown. Allison began to move differently, her shoulders hunched inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. Her steps around the apartment were quieter, measured, careful. She flinched at sudden sounds. She paused at doorways to listen first. She checked Marcus's expression before speaking, gauging the tension in his jaw or the sharpness of his tone. Her body lived in defense mode. Olivia noticed. Of course she noticed. When Allison visited her mother's house, she wore long sleeves, even in warm weather. She avoided direct eye contact. She answered questions with quick reassurances. "I'm fine. Everything's okay. Marcus is just stressed lately," as if saying it fast enough would make it true. Olivia asked gentle questions. "Are you happy? Are you sure Marcus treats you well? Is there anything you want to tell me?" Allison always shook her head, always smiled, always hid everything. Part of her was terrified Marcus would find out she'd said too much. The other part feared Olivia would confirm what Allison was trying so desperately to deny, that her marriage was turning into something dark and dangerous. The more Olivia reached out, the deeper Allison retreated. But Marcus saw Olivia's concern, and he didn't like it. One night, after Allison mentioned visiting her mother, Marcus stood in the doorway, blocking the hall, his eyes burning with low, controlled fury. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly. "You think your mother understands you better than I do? You think she can protect you?" His voice dropped into something colder. "Leave me and I'll ruin you. Do you hear me? I will destroy your life." The threat hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Allison believed him, and from that moment on, fear became the silent companion of every step she took. Behind closed doors, the violence no longer came as a surprise. It had become part of her life, part of her survival. The night of the dinner, the same night that shattered every layer of illusion, returned in sharp, vivid fragments as Allison sat trembling beside Olivia. The past no longer existed. The future felt terrifyingly uncertain. Only the present mattered now, and it had unfolded with a brutality Olivia would never forget. When she first arrived at the Hale apartment, Olivia sensed the tension immediately. Now she understood why. The dinner had never been about honoring Robert's memory. It had been a stage, one Marcus controlled completely, with Gloria positioned like an accomplice waiting in the wings. The evening unraveled quickly. After Allison spilled that single drop of water near Marcus's plate, the air shifted. Marcus's expression darkened with a violence that needed no explanation. His voice cut through the soft dinner chatter, each word dripping with humiliation. He accused Allison loudly, making sure everyone at the table heard. He called her careless, incompetent. His voice rose sharp and venomous. Then came the moment Olivia could never erase. Marcus stood abruptly, grabbed Allison by the arm, and yanked her up from her chair so forcefully that her body hit the edge of the table. Plates slid, cutlery clattered, the candles flickered violently. Allison cried out, not loud, not dramatic, just a small, broken sound that made Olivia's heart crack open. Gloria didn't move. She didn't protest. She didn't even blink. Instead, she calmly reached for her napkin, dabbed the corners of her mouth, and said in a cold, measured tone, "If you can't handle simple hosting duties, maybe you're not ready to be a wife." It was approval disguised as disappointment, permission disguised as concern. Olivia felt the room tilt. For a split second she froze, shock rooting her in place. Then instinct took over. She reached into her purse with trembling hands and tapped her phone's voice recorder. The microphone captured everything. Marcus's shouting, Allison's cries, Gloria's chilling remarks, the thud of furniture, the scrape of chairs. In Washington state, one-party consent made the recording legally admissible. Olivia had never been more grateful for knowing the law. "Let her go!" she demanded, voice shaking but firm. Marcus ignored her, gripping Allison harder. That was when Olivia pulled out her phone again, this time to dial 911. She stepped backward, maintaining distance, her voice steady as she reported active domestic violence. Marcus spun toward her, fury twisting his features, but he said nothing. He knew the police would arrive any moment, and they did. The arrival was swift. Firm knocks, then officers entering the apartment as the scene unfolded. Marcus backpedaled instantly, trying to appear calm, rational, misunderstood. But the red marks on Allison's arm told a different story. The officers separated everyone, took statements, photographed bruises, and assessed the state of the home. Gloria tried to intervene, insisting it was a marital spat blown out of proportion. But the officers ignored her. Her icy smirk returned only when they escorted Marcus out in handcuffs, a silent promise that retaliation would follow. And she kept that promise. The next morning marked the beginning of the Second War. Marcus and Gloria launched a revenge campaign with ruthless efficiency. Gloria called Allison's workplace, insinuating that Allison was unstable, prone to emotional outbursts, and unfit for her role. Anonymous emails appeared in Allison's office inbox, spreading fabricated rumors about her conduct. At the same time, false allegations surfaced online, claims suggesting Olivia manipulated the situation to tear the family apart. Marcus, from the precinct holding cell, used every phone call to pressure acquaintances into discrediting both women. He framed himself as the victim of a hysterical wife and an overbearing mother-in-law. Social media accounts, some real, many clearly fake, began posting defamatory comments about Olivia's work as a volunteer grief counselor, accusing her of exploiting vulnerable clients. It was a coordinated attack, swift, vicious, calculated. But as the smear campaign escalated, Olivia grew more resolute. She had the recording. She had witnessed the violence firsthand. And she had finally seen the truth of what Allison had endured for years. The breaking point had come, and now there was no going back. 2 days after the disastrous dinner and Marcus's arrest, Olivia returned home from running errands to find a plain manila envelope lying on her porch. There was no return address, no name, not even a stamp. Someone had placed it there by hand. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. After everything that had happened, her instincts prickled. Nothing from the Hales arrived without a storm hidden inside. She carried it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and slowly opened the seal. What she found inside made her blood run cold. A flash drive and a single note. They won't stop. You need this. And Olivia inserted the drive into her laptop with trembling hands. The file labeled Listen. When she pressed play, the audio began immediately, Gloria's voice, unmistakably sharp and controlled, speaking with chilling clarity. Allison needs to be removed from the picture. She's useless, a liability. Once Marcus is out, we'll make sure her employer doubts her stability. If she loses her job, she'll come crawling back. Then Marcus's voice joined hers. We have to go after Olivia too. She ruined everything. She thinks she can take my wife away from me. I'll bury her professionally. Olivia froze. This wasn't anger. This wasn't emotion. This was strategy. Their voices continued, calm and calculating, mapping out a plan to destroy both women, socially, financially, emotionally. They discussed fabricating HR complaints, twisting Allison's medical records, harassing Olivia's volunteer clients, and pushing rumors into community groups. But the worst part came minutes later, spoken in a tone so casual it made Olivia's stomach turn. Gloria said, "You worry too much, Marcus. Men are weak. You just give them a nudge and they fall. Like Arthur. 11 years ago. He stumbled right down the stairs. Tragic accident. At least that's what they all think." Marcus laughed. "You really pushed him?" A pause. Then a quiet, unmistakable. "Of course I did." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Gloria had just confessed to killing her own husband, and she spoke of it like she was recounting a household chore. No remorse, no hesitation. As the recording continued, they discussed Allison as though she were property. Marcus mentioned forcing her into signing financial documents that would give him access to her savings. Gloria suggested manipulating legal loopholes to tie Allison's accounts to the Hale family estate. They talked about keeping her in line, and if that didn't work, making her disappear socially. And then came the most frightening line of all, spoken by Gloria in a tone that felt like ice pressed directly against Olivia's spine. "If she tries to leave him again, we'll handle it. You know how." Olivia shut her laptop with shaking hands. She pressed her palms to her face, breathing through the rising panic. This wasn't just abuse anymore. It was a conspiracy. And now there was proof. The note had been signed in. There was only one person it could be. Nicholas Hale, Marcus's cousin, the quiet, uncomfortable man who always avoided eye contact during holiday gatherings. Olivia had noticed him at the wedding years earlier, hovering near the edges, never joining the family conversations. Marcus had dismissed him as weak and spineless. Perhaps that was why Nicholas had been able to observe everything unnoticed. Olivia arranged to meet him at a small cafe in Ballard the next afternoon. Nicholas arrived wearing a worn jacket, hands shaking slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I should have come forward earlier," he said softly. "I knew what they were capable of. I was afraid. But after what happened to Allison, I couldn't stay silent." He told Olivia that he had collected audio clips over the years, saving them as his insurance against Gloria and Marcus's cruelty. He admitted he had never planned to use them, but the dinner, the violence, the way Allison cried out, it broke him. "I had to give you something," he said. "You deserved the truth, and Allison deserved protection." Olivia reached across the table, gripping his shaking hands. For the first time in weeks, she felt something that resembled hope. The fight was far from over. But now she finally had a weapon. The courtroom in downtown Seattle was packed on the morning the state versus Hale proceedings began. Reporters filled the benches. Attorneys shuffled through documents, and spectators murmured in anticipation. What began as a domestic violence case had escalated into something far larger. Assault, coercion, conspiracy, and, because of the audio recording Olivia received, even a historic homicide charge. Marcus Hale entered first, escorted by deputies, wearing a crisp suit someone had sent him in custody. He walked as though he expected applause, chin high, expression polished. He gave a small, confident smile to the gallery, as if the entire trial were an inconvenience he would soon charm his way out of. Gloria Hale followed behind him, wrists cuffed, but posture stiff and defiant. She looked at the courtroom not with fear, but with contempt, as though the proceedings were beneath her. But the charges were not small. For Marcus, domestic violence assault, violation of a no-contact order, attempted coercion, conspiracy to commit financial abuse. For Gloria, conspiracy and coercion, aiding and abetting domestic violence, historic homicide, based on her recorded confession of pushing her late husband down the stairs 11 years earlier. The prosecution presented everything in measured, devastating detail. First came the authenticated audio recordings, their voices unmistakable. Gloria's calm admission of killing her husband drained any remaining color from the room. Marcus's laughter in response cut through the speakers like a blade. Their discussion of sabotaging Allison's career, destroying Olivia's reputation, and weaponizing social pressure left the jury visibly disturbed. Then came the testimony. Allison took the stand first. She spoke quietly, but clearly, recounting how the cycles of violence began, how control seeped into every part of her life, how she learned to make herself small to survive. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth, the bruises, the threats, the nights she thought she wouldn't make it through. The courtroom was silent as she described the dinner, the shove, the grip on her arm, the humiliation Marcus delivered with Gloria watching approvingly. When she finished, a juror wiped away tears. Olivia testified next. She provided context, what the family had been before Marcus arrived, how grief made Allison vulnerable, how she noticed the deterioration but couldn't name it until it was too late. She explained the recordings she captured at the dinner, the injuries she witnessed, and the fear that turned her daughter into a shadow of herself. She spoke not with anger, but with a heavy, steady resolve. Her voice never wavered. Then Nicholas Hale approached the stand. He looked smaller than he had at the cafe, but steadier somehow. He testified that he had overheard disturbing conversations over the years, Gloria belittling Allison, Marcus discussing ways to keep her in line, and comments that hinted at a long pattern of coercion in the Hale household. He admitted he had recorded some conversations for his own safety, never intending to use them unless necessary. And when I saw what they did at that dinner, he said quietly, I realized necessary had arrived. Marcus's attorney attempted to paint Nicholas as unstable, eager for attention. But the recordings were clear, unaltered, and time-stamped. The truth stood on its own. When Marcus took the stand in his own defense, he delivered exactly what everyone expected: charm. He softened his voice, offered rehearsed smiles, and presented himself as a loving husband who had been misunderstood. He spoke of marital tension, stress, and miscommunication. But under cross-examination, the facade cracked. Audio clips contradicted his statements. Photos from the police intake showed Allison's bruises. The restraining order violation was indisputable. Every attempt to redirect blame collapsed under the weight of evidence. Gloria refused to testify, sitting instead with her chin raised, staring straight ahead as if the courtroom were a play she refused to watch. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdicts arrived. Guilty on all counts, both of them. Marcus received a lengthy prison sentence, years that would remove him completely from Allison's life. Gloria received even longer, the homicide charge alone carrying decades of incarceration. As the judge read the final ruling, Allison exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Olivia reached for her daughter's hand and squeezed it gently. Justice had come. Not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly, undeniably. The long nightmare that had shadowed their lives was finally ending. 2 years passed slowly, quietly, measured not in dramatic milestones, but in small, steady shifts that softened the air around the Mercer home. The chaos of the trial faded into memory. The names Marcus and Gloria no longer dominated headlines or court schedules. Their sentences were long enough that neither Allison nor Olivia needed to think about them again. The focus turned inward, toward healing. Allison's recovery began in a modest therapist's office overlooking Lake Union, where gentle conversations helped her untangle years of fear that had tightened around her like knots. In the beginning, she could barely speak about what happened. Her voice trembled. Her hands fidgeted. She apologized for everything, even for crying. But gradually her posture straightened. Her voice steadied. She began to name the harm she had endured without shrinking inside herself. Her therapist taught her how trauma rewires the body, how hypervigilance wasn't weakness, but survival. Slowly, Allison learned to breathe without waiting for something to go wrong. She learned to make choices without checking someone else's expression first. She learned to occupy space again. She switched jobs, moving to a different department within her company, a team that valued her, protected her privacy, and encouraged her growth. For the first time in years, Allison walked into work without scanning the room for danger. She left the office feeling tired in the normal way, not the way that comes from constant dread. She bought herself small things, new shoes, a soft sweater, a cookbook, without guilt or permission. She decorated her living room with warm lamps and framed photos from her childhood, slowly reclaiming the parts of herself that Marcus had tried to erase. Olivia watched all of it with quiet relief. Her own path after the trial also changed. The experience, the helplessness, the guilt, the fear, had sharpened her sense of purpose. She began volunteering more actively with a local domestic violence advocacy group, using her background in grief counseling to support women navigating trauma. She completed additional certifications, attended workshops, and joined panels to share what she had learned, not just as a counselor, but as a mother who had nearly lost her daughter. When survivors sat across from her, trembling or ashamed, Olivia spoke gently. She told them healing wasn't linear, that it wasn't loud, that sometimes it was as small as getting out of bed or stepping outside for fresh air. Her presence became a steadying force, empathetic, grounded, real. Mother and daughter gradually rebuilt trust between them, not because it had been broken by betrayal, but because trauma had created distance, silences that didn't belong to either of them. They filled that distance with long walks around Green Lake, quiet breakfasts, shared grocery trips, movies on Olivia's couch, and late-night conversations that stretched softly into the dark. They didn't dwell on what had happened. They didn't pretend it hadn't happened. They simply allowed space for both pain and peace, side by side. One cool spring morning, Allison invited Olivia to her apartment for tea. The windows were open, letting in a gentle breeze. When Olivia arrived, she noticed something subtle but unmistakable. Allison's shoulders were relaxed, her expression open, her smile real. They sat together, sipping chamomile, watching people walk their dogs along the street below. The city hummed with soft life. Flowers bloomed on the balcony railing. A sense of calm settled over the room like a warm blanket. "Mom," Allison said after a while, her voice steady. "I'm okay now." Olivia didn't cry. She simply reached over, took her daughter's hand, and held it in both of hers. The gesture said everything. Abuse steals pieces of a person. Confidence, voice, safety, certainty. But healing, slow and patient, returns them one by one. As the light filtered through the window and touched their hands, mother and daughter sat quietly, breathing the same peaceful air. The nightmare was behind them. The future was theirs again.